Poke the Bear is brought to you by PrizePicks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 257, presented by PrizePicks and Game Time Tickets. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we are joined by the esteemed Ty Anderson, 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, what's going on?
What's happening? How we doing?
Doing well. Happy to be back at the rink. I know it's just captain's practice. I know it's only so much you can kind of glean from the first couple of days here where it's guys just kind of shaking the rust off, but it felt like the first day of school. Good to see everyone again. Then Evan shows up and kills the vibes just a little bit, but it feels good that we actually have some tangible stuff to talk about finally. Not as much of the speculation, anything like that. We're getting back into the swing of things at long last after what feels like the longest off season ever.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we've talked about it before, but like the off season felt like it was on hyper speed, and then it just all of a sudden came to a crawl. And so, that's been wild. Yeah, it's nice to be back. I mean, I apologize to any readers or viewers or listeners who expect me to watch a captain's practice and give you my takeaways and my studs and duds. Like, I don't really have one of those. These are really they're informal skates. It's getting the rust off. It's getting, it's shaking the summer off your legs there. So it's just nice to be back. It's sort of a preview of what's to come between rookie camp and then actual training camp. So good to be back. Nice to see guys starting to shuffle in here and settle into their new homes, their new cities. Some people having babies and stuff like that. So it's nice. It feels normal because I think for us, more often than not, 7 months out of the year, like this is what we do. And so it is our typical day to day. And I know you do more, like you're off everywhere, but like me, like I kind of focus on hockey just because we got two guys that cover the Patriots. And so I don't really got to go do that. It'd be overkill if we did. So I've just been kind of sitting around, drifting aimlessly. So to have something to do again is quite welcomed in my life. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you look at going into captain's practice, as you said, not too much you can really draw from it. Even like, we spoke to Marchand, McAvoy, Mark Kastelik, Jonas Korpisalo, Elias Lindholm. We'll get into the Marchand thing, which probably has the most meat in terms of actual stuff that we can talk about. A lot of it's just
14 minutes of Brad Marchand talking.
Yes, exactly. Again, that's why he's one of the best in terms of he will keep on talking. Gives you a lot of good stuff. Like last year in the playoffs when he was like, yeah, we all want to injure each other, which was a great, unbelievable media scrum right before it was a game. Was that game 6? It must have been because he was probably cleared to play,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always an adventure with the Brad Marchand media scrum. So we'll get more into his quotes a little bit later on, but a lot of it's just, the standard, how was your summer? What do you do in the off season? Those kind of things. But I think Mark Kastelik had an interesting comment in terms of, I think we're at this point of the year before camp even starts. It's guys kind of just taking stock of their team, their expectations, all that stuff. Everyone's starting from square one. Everyone's hopeful going into a year. But Mark Kastelik mentioned, looking at the state of this team, and he's already a big body that's going to be, I think, or should be a fixture on that fourth line, but 6'4", over 210 pounds. He pretty much mentioned that what stood out to him when he got to the Bruins room is how big and heavy everyone is. And there was one guy on Twitter made a graphic talking about how the Bruins are actually the heaviest team in the NHL this year, an average weight of 207 pounds. They've got 13 skaters that are 6'3" or taller, not counting the goalies because, it's more of looking at, the forwards up front. Obviously, your defense is, the smallest guy is McAvoy, who still hits like a freight train. But I think you look at the identity of this team. I feel like there's year after year, Ty, we hear people talking about how the Bruins need to get more physical, heavier. They finally have it. We can stop talking about it with the way this team is built. In terms of you've got, size kind of all over the lineup right now. Looking at this team, how much stock do you kind of put into that? Do you think it's something that is crucial to this team? Is it more coincidental? How much should we be playing into either what the Bruins are doing or how much impact that should have on this team this year?
Yeah, I don't put too much stock into it. I think it does speak to the thing that I do put stock in is that they're taller. They're longer, and I think where that goes kind of hand in hand, or where you can feel good about that, is that these are guys that have filled out their frames. It's not, okay, he's 6'5", but he's 180 pounds. You know what I mean? And so I think getting longer, I think that's the way you want to go, because their method of building their team here is pretty clear. Like, it's going to be in the defensive zone. So how do you do that? You make the rink smaller. Well, how do you do that? You get guys that have massive reaches and can use that to their advantage. Now you have to hope that it doesn't lead to penalties for a guy like Zadorov or Carlo, or even Lindholm took so many penalties last year, it felt like. But if you can effectively use your reach and your size, it's going to make your D-zone workload a little bit easier, on your forwards, then you can go the other way. And so I think that's kind of where I put stock in it. I put stock in it in the height more than the weight. But it's clear what they're doing here. I mean, they hit a point where they got very tired of not having the size and not having the reach, if you will. So I think to now have that, now you got to utilize it. So it's not surprising. It's just, does it play out to be a legitimate advantage? Because I think last year they were heavy too. I don't know if they were number one, but I think they were a heavier team last year as well.
Yeah. I think it also depends on what exactly the skill set is with the player, right? Like, you could be the heaviest team in the league and have your fourth line be, guys like Pat Maroon or Lucic, these, bigger players that aren't going to win a foot race. But if you've got a guy like Kastelik, who moves pretty well at 6'4", Max Jones, who's 6'3", moves really well, Johnny Beecher, who's arguably probably the best skater on the team at 6'3", you've got a blend of, speed and skill that and size that really helps you out there, right? So I think you look at, adding a guy like Zadorov does kind of probably tip the scale a little bit, because he's like, what, 250, 260? It's a big boy. So that probably puts you a little bit ahead of some of these other teams. But I do think it probably comes down to just the play style more than anything else, because also you look at some of these other teams that aren't ranked that high, like the Florida Panthers, who I think we all can agree, beyond the fact that they're very good, are a pain in the ass to play. They will beat the shit out of you. They are 29th at 194 pounds. So again, look at the way they play as opposed to maybe just their weight or anything like that, right? And it's even the same thing with like Brendan Carlo's 6'6", right? Is he, just because you look at his size, is he a bruiser? No, but he uses that frame to, and that long reach to, break up passes, to do the little things, right? I think it's all about how you use this kind of size and weight you maybe have on this roster, as opposed to just like, we want a bunch of bruisers, we want a bunch of guys that's going to land well. It's like, no, I think the Bruins, the way they've constructed the roster, it's, I think, probably more coincidental that they've just got a bunch of bigger bodies, but I like that it's size with, some skill. And it's even something that McAvoy talked about too, right? Like, he talks about Zadorov and the fact that, yes, we all know kind of the highlights of his game in terms of how physical he is, how, tough he is to go up against, how good he is, clearing guys out of the net front. But he's a more mobile player than I think a lot of people give credit to. And something that McAvoy talked about is that they can have a lot of size, and that's what a lot of the league, a lot of the really good teams have, is a lot of big bodies on the blue line. But you need to have some dynamic players back there as well. And when you look at McAvoy and Lohrei and Zadorov and those guys, yes, they're all big bodies. They all can land hits when needed, but they're not just one-dimensional. They're not just a guy. They're not like a Joel Edmondson. Joel Edmondson's 6'5", 220, but what else does he really bring, right? I feel like the Bruins don't really have that, whether it's on their D-core or some of these guys further down the lineup that are big, but it's not kind of their main calling card, right?
No, absolutely. And I think the Bruins have been very cognizant of that over the last few years, where if you bring in a guy here, he's got to be able to make puck plays. He's got to be able to play in most situations. Now, a guy like Andrew Peeke is not going to quarterback your power play, but you have confidence that he can make a good first pass out of his own zone, right? And I think that's kind of where they're going. And I think you see that even with, if you want to call it a trade, a 1-for-1 here, you move on from Derek Forbort and Matt Grzelcyk, and you bring in Nikita Zadorov, and you essentially promote Mason Lohrei to a full-time lineup spot. Like, you're basically saying, like, we need guys that we believe can do it all, versus, okay, this guy's a puck moving secondary specialist, in terms of like good first pass, blends with McAvoy, all that. Oh, and this guy's a PK stalwart. It's like, no, we want guys that can do everything. And I think that's kind of where they've been building their roster. And it makes sense, right? You don't want to ever, by design, build a roster that is not able to play in all situations. So that's telling for sure. But no, I don't think that like Don Sweeney wasn't like Jabba the Hutt, Pizza the Hut, fat guys like pizza, pepperoni Tony. Like he wasn't like, just give me that guy.
We don't want Bib Fortuna. Fuck out of here. No, we don't want some big boys.
I think it's just like, it's the size, it's the range, and taller guys will be, they'll weigh a little bit more typically. If they filled up their frame, if they're in their prime, they will have maximized the nutrition and the training part of their game so that they are not a string bean out there getting knocked off the puck. And I think, even the guy like Brandon Carlo, like I think he looks like physically, he looks like he's built out. He like the last couple of years, look like he's really added, he was always in shape, and obviously like he's an NHL player. They're all in shape for the most part. But he like looks like he's kind of added some like definition, right? And like he's kind of growing into his body now, it feels like, for sure. And so I think you're seeing that, and now it's about maximizing it. But yeah, to your point, like McAvoy's the smallest guy. He's also the most dynamic, probably. So that should mean good things for them. If we go back to Colorado in 22, Makar was the smallest guy they had. And nobody on the Bruins can ever be like Makar. McAvoy will never be like Cale Makar. I'm sorry. It'd be great, but he's never going to be that guy.
Clip it
for when he puts up 90 points. I don't think he's going to be like an 80-point guy. That's mainly what I mean by that. But like, if your ace is your smallest guy, that's not typically a bad thing. Like that allows you to kind of allow that guy to take flight, so to speak. So I like it from that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's a lot to like about just maybe the construction of this team and the style they're going for, as opposed to just the outright size or anything like that. One player who is not over 6'3" is Brad Marchand, who does not really need to be that size to be a very dynamic player. But in his address to us after the first captain's practice, probably the headliner in terms of his takeaways is went under the knife once again, 3 times total. I know Don Sweeney mentioned that they didn't expect any surgeries, and Brad Marchand's like, I'm going to do it 3 times, actually. I'm going to get had a torn tendon in his elbow, had a abdomen, like hernia surgery, and also had his groin worked on as well. So 3 surgeries in a short span of time. Has not skated with the main group during captain's practice. He hopes to be ready at some point during training camp and maybe jump in a little bit later on. Obviously, this is a guy who's built a career tie out of exceeding expectations, proving people wrong, probably accelerating his timeline in terms of expected recovery timetables, all those kind of things. But when you look at his age and, another summer of multiple procedures, are you getting concerned at all about his health, or is it still kind of it's part of the gig and you should still expect him to be a bona fide top 6 player for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of the gig. The biggest thing I'm going to be watching this year is the shooting. I do think the elbow injury and even the abdomen injury, I think that did affect his ability to shoot the puck late in the year. I thought he was passing a bit more than he would. I mean, like he was passing up like open looks. Like he would get it on the tape on the power play and he would still look for that extra pass. And you were kind of wondering why he's doing that. So I want to see how his shot looks. But yeah, I mean, if we go back even further, Connor, like this is like what? He's had 5 major surgeries essentially in the last, let's say 4 years. He had that one, I believe it was a sports hernia entering the 2021 season.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Where he said that had been bothering him for like 4 years. Yep. And so he gets that. He gets double hip surgery in 22 and now these 3. And so it's part of the gig, I think, for a guy that size and the way he plays. But it'd be really great to get a healthy season out of him because I think they need it. Like when you move on from the guys they've moved on from up front, especially, I know they're not world beaters, but you lost 47 goals between Heinen, JVR, and DeBrusk. Like Marchand had 29. If he can be healthy and get back to maybe 35, and that might be hard given his role, but if he can do that, that just alleviates some of the pressure that this offense is going to feel this year. And so I think he can hit 30 again, but we might just be in that Bergeron era where every summer now requires a new recovery or a new procedure or a new whatever of some sort. It's a matter of how severe they're going to be. And these ones feel like a little bit of both. You know, anytime it's a sports hernia thing, it feels major to me. But like elbow tendon, like, okay, like he said he played through that all last year. So it must have been not that bad, but still, you don't want these to get worse as they age.
Yeah, no. And I think it is something where it's natural, I think, for a player of that age, you know, to be concerned about the amount of procedures. But I kind of agree with you that maybe spin it into a positive, that if you know, getting that elbow fixed, and that hernia addressed and those things, if that can help him maybe get more of, you know, stronger shots off, as you said, like there were so many times later in the year, he's either deferring looks that he would normally be burying, or he would get a one-timer and the puck would just die immediately. Like I felt like there was 3 or 4 times in, you know, the games against Toronto where they tried to put them away, or even in the Florida series. And Marchand had a pretty productive playoff in terms of the games he was able to play in. I think he was close to a point per game guy. But again, when you look at what kind of doomed the Bruins in that Florida series in terms of just not being able to maybe land that needed knockout punch, you know, when you're holding a lead in the early stages of the third period or something like that, if getting that elbow fix can maybe get more out of Marchand, I view that as a positive. Because, yeah, again, as you said, it's kind of like with Bergeron. You're probably going to have to just do this and deal with it next couple of years. And I feel like Marchand, it's not hitting the point yet to him where it's like, all right, I don't know how much more I can do this. He pretty much was saying, like, you know, you hit the point where your kids are getting older and you don't want to be at the rink, and that motivation kind of wanes, understandably, as it is for any pro athlete who's been dedicating themselves to it for 10 plus years. Doesn't seem like Marchand's hit that point yet. And again, this is a guy that's 70-ish points away from 1,000. This is a guy that even at his age desperately wants to be in the Olympics representing Team Canada. So I think he's still, even though that resume speaks for itself in terms of individually, team impact, all those things, he's done more than enough that if he hung up his skates, people would commend him on a great career. Feels like he still wants to play another couple of years and has more to give moving forward.
Yeah, I've always felt that. I've said that, I think, on here before, and I've said it elsewhere. Like, I think Marchand is more like Mark Recchi than Patrice Bergeron. I think he's going to want to play until he's 42. You know, I don't want to say 43 like Recchi, because that's a long time, but I see him playing into his 40s, you know, versus retiring at, say, 37, 38, like Bergeron did. And so, and that's his right. You know, like, he can make that call when he wants to. Things can always change, but I've always got that vibe from him that so long as he feels he can be a valuable contributor to a team, he's going to play. And he's still very much a valuable contributor. Now, is he a 40-goal, 100-point guy like he was, 5 years ago? Like, no, maybe not, but he's still, I think, one of the better two-way wings in hockey. He's an emotional spark plug, and he can flip a game on its head. There's value in that, obviously. We saw it in the playoffs. We saw it in the regular season. At times when this team was slumping, he would put the team on his back and get him going. And so I think that, that is sort of like, as long as that is there, he's got a spot in this league on this roster. And so I don't think, like, yeah, the 40-goal, 100-point years might be behind him, but I don't see him as like you got to manage him now. Like, he's not like a Chara in that regard, where, like, I think he's still got some legit good years left in the tank.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we're seeing, like, all of a sudden a 20-goal, 21-assist year or something on the horizon quite yet for a guy like Brad Marchand. There'll be more to talk about with Marchand and his media scrum, but before we do that, Ty, let's take a quick break. Hear from our good friends over at PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, your picks are still live. Big questions going into the football season. Will Patrick Mahomes throw for more or less than 267.5 yards one week? Will Jalen Hurts throw for 240.5 passing yards another? Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Now, back to the show.
Shout out once again to our good friends over at PrizePicks. All right, Ty, looking else at what Marchand mentioned to us, speaking to the media on Tuesday, the topic of who's going to be on the wing with Marchand on what should be the Bruins' second line. Marchand already mentioned that he expects to play with Charlie Coyle another year and seems very high on Coyle, even though he's 32 years old now, which is kind of crazy to think that, how long he's kind of been tenured with this team. But he thinks that Coyle has more to give, and they're excited to continue to kind of build that chemistry up. But remains to be seen who's going to be riding shotgun with them on that second line. And Marchand was asked what kind of player he's looking for there, and kind of, emphasize that it can't just be a dynamic, just, empty calorie or one-dimensional offensive player, right? He mentions, just because you can dangle through 3 skaters doesn't mean you've got a spot there, which I was like, all right, Fabian Lysell, like, it's a little bit of a reality check. So looking at Marchand's comments, one, like, what do you kind of interpret from it? Is that just kind of captain speak of, hey, like, you got to make sure you have a well-rounded game? Is it putting up roadblocks for maybe some of these younger players? Like, how do you imagine what his comments were and how much we should read into it in terms of what exactly he's looking for and what maybe the team is looking for in that spot in the lineup?
Yeah, I did. I agreed with you in terms of hearing those comments. The first guy I thought of was Fabian Lysell. Now, is that fair to Fabian? I don't know, but it does lead you to believe that, like, given the nature of that line and what their task is every night, like, some nights is different, right? Like, it all depends who they face. Some nights are going to go against the other team's top line. Other nights are going to be asked to score some goals. And so you need to have a guy there who can do it all. And so that's why I think it lends itself to a more veteran type, a Morgan Geekie, a Trent Frederick. So that's where I think they're going to go. I think they're going to go safe. And do I love that? Not all the time, but I think it comes back to how you're going to use that line. And that's a line that, if you're going to be asked to shut down other teams' top lines, like, you kind of have to be a little bit safe, right? And there's room for tinkering. There's room for saying, okay, now it's a scoring line, so we're going to put Lysell up there. We're going to put whoever up there. Like, but it's just like the trickle about effect of making that a safe two-way line, I think, is important, because I think we feel like the first line is going to get a lot of ozone work. And the third line is going to have 1, maybe 2 kids on it. So if they're going to be a shutdown line, okay, well then give me the best shutdown option you have there. But if you want balance, okay, let's open the door for some growing pains. In that same thing, Marchand talks about how he played with Mark Savard, and it was one of the worst games ever because he thought he had to be something that he wasn't, or he had to make highlight reel plays. It's like, okay, well, like, can we give a kid that experience? Can we let somebody go through that and go, oh, I got to play this way when I'm with these guys? Like I don't want to shut the door on a guy out of the gate just because he's not a two-way savant out of the gate. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's my only concern with how they may be approaching that right wing 2 spot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important starting out in training camp in the preseason for there to be kind of an open mind in terms of like Marchand wants a solid, dependable player there. But if Lysell has 5 points in his first 3 preseason games and looks like he's a guy that can gel the top 6 role, you roll with the punches there, right? And you have a young player that you ease along there. And I think it also comes down to what Jim Montgomery and the Bruins are looking for in terms of the identity of those lines, right? Like, as you said, they could view the top line as getting a lot of ozone time, get more out of guys like Pavel Zacha, have Lindholm in a spot where he can really dominate and gel with a guy like David Pastrnak. And then, as you said, you can view the second line as more of a shutdown line if it's, Marchand, Coyle, like Frederick, who always plays well with Coyle, is a sneaky, really good defensive forward. If you look at like his underlying numbers, really kind of rarely puts his team in kind of a bad spot defensively. And then like your third line, like you could make the argument that if you put Lysell up in the top 6 role, that third line could be more of a veteran Frederick, Geeky, those kind of guys, and you can exploit matchups. But maybe they view the third line as kind of the development line, right? Where maybe it's one established player like a Frederick or a Geeky, and then it's Poitras and Lysell, and you let them kind of run wild and kind of learn on the fly. And if they gel and continue to get better, they're setting themselves up for a greater role moving forward. Like, I think it all depends on how these guys play and what you get out of the preseason. But I think it's important, at least for the start of camp, for there to be an open mind, right? Like, yes, Marchand wants accountability, wants these things, but if Lysell, who has a skill set that the Bruins really don't have, I think you have to play into that if he's showing that he has a willingness and the ability to seize this opportunity in front of him.
100%. And the other part of it, that like the part that goes with that is like this, you got to get something out of him. Yeah. Like him being Fabian Lysell, like, and I'm willing to deal with some growing pains because you have a roster that I think is more built to withstand those growing pains. You brought in Elias Lindholm, you brought in Nikita Zadorov. You have a roster that I think like allows you to take more chances with guys. And so I would do that. And the other part of it too is like you have, like, again, going back to this roster, like you have a more than a couple of guys who can play wing and center. And the balance that can give you, like, you should be able to get away with having one position or one spot in your lineup where you're like, he's not perfect, but if we go through this now, it'll pay off in January and February and then ultimately April and May. And I think that's the mindset they got to have here. And I know it's hard. We've talked about this before. Like when you have a lame duck coach and Jim Montgomery's entering the final year of his contract, like he's going to want to win that night. And coaches often are going to go and say, well, we're not a developmental league. That's in the AHL. Like I can't focus on that. I got to win tonight's game because my livelihood depends on winning tonight's game. And so that's going to be tricky, but I think they have the roster to be able to do that. Personally, I just feel that way, that like they should have a roster that allows them to bring one of these kids along, whether it's Merkulov, whether it's Lysell. Like I want to see them. I don't want to see them in the AHL anymore. I'm good. I'm done. Lysell has he had 50 points in 56 games a year ago. They said he was better after the call out from Ryan Mouchinel. Don Sweeney says we would have given him a run here if he didn't get hurt. Mouchinel says he's ready to push for a job. Okay, I want to see it then. Give me the buy-in across the board. I want to see it then. Because if you're not going to get it after this, then when are we going to get it? That's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I think you need to find out. And that's why, again, even if Lysell isn't on that second line with Marchand and Coyle, I'd love to see if your third line is a Geeky with a Poitras and a Lysell. And we'll see how Poitras is too. Like, we'll see. And I think it also comes down to what these young players can prove, right? Like the Bruins now have the leeway to start Poitras in Providence, so they don't think he's ready. If he has another preseason like last year, they don't have to worry about it, right? If Lysell runs with this, he's got a spot, regardless of whether it's a second or third line. I will take your third line having 2 young guys that have high-end skill that could be 40, 50-point guys this year if all goes well and have a lot of more room to grow moving forward. Like you got a 20 to 21-year-old guys with top 6 potential marinating on that third line where you can have more scoring punch further down the lineup. Sounds like a great scenario. But again, it comes down to one, I think the Bruins get, opening the door and making sure these guys have an opportunity in the preseason to prove their value, but also falls on the players. Like Lysell needs to there needs to be a couple of these games here where he shows that especially he can roll with and thrive at this next level. Because as you said, we've seen it in Providence. We haven't seen it at all in the NHL. He hasn't gotten a shot yet, but it should be there for him. He just has to roll with it.
Yeah, and the other part of it is that, like, I firmly believe that, and this might be my own optimism getting the best of me, which it often can do. I do think Lysell will be a better NHL player than an AHL player, if that makes sense. Like, I think that this is a guy who, throughout his entire career, it's one of the reasons why he fell to the Bruins. He's been supremely confident in his abilities, his talents. And now when you're confident in your talents, you also have to battle frustration because you feel like you deserve better than what you're getting. Yeah. But it's ultimately, to your point, it's on you to prove it. And this is a great chance for him to prove it. And so if he doesn't, that's going to hurt. It's going to hurt him. It's going to hurt the team. It's going to hurt his stock. It's going to hurt those who believed in him. But ultimately, like, if this is what you want and you're pissed off in juniors in Sweden because you want to be playing pro in Sweden, you get a trade. Now you're playing pro. You come over to North America at 19. Like, this is what you want, right? So go out and take it. And I think that there's really no roadblock in his way, like there was, say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe even last year for that matter. Like this is on him. I think he's got the backing of the team, and so he's got to answer that bell. But I hope it's a full buy-in. If Mouchinel's saying he looks like he's going to push, if Sweeney's saying it, okay, I want to see Jim Montgomery treat him as such. Don't open training camp with him between, two guys that we know are going to be in Providence. Like, give him a legit look with that line. I think that's a real thing I want to see. I don't want to see Tyler Johnson have more minutes with Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand than a Fabian Lysell. I don't want to see that, honestly.
Yes. Noted defensive stalwart, Tyler Johnson, which he's been on some bad Chicago teams, but numbers don't look great. So
no, they're rough. I looked up, yeah. I did a deep dive. They're rough, man. Oh.
Yeah, it's not great. So we'll see how that all kind of pans out in terms of who ends up getting that spot and how much leeway these younger players like Patra and Lysell will get in camp. Ty, we have a little bit more to talk about with Marchand's comments, but before we do that, let's get another quick break here from our good friends over at Game Time Tickets.
The summer is coming to an end, but rejoice, sports fans, because football season is back. And if you're a Patriots fan and want to make your way to Gillette Stadium, you got to go with Game Time Tickets. There's nothing better than posting up with your buddies at a tailgate, working the grill, knocking back a few beers, and taking in that crisp fall air over at Foxborough. With the new Patriots season upon us, now is your time to see Drake May in action, and Game Time Tickets will get you the best seats at the best prices to get you into the stadium. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace that makes getting NFL tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to kickoff. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. There's no shortage of options when using the Game Time app. Game Time Tickets app makes it easy to sort through which specific game or other event you want to attend and shows you the best spots available to take in the action. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And with the Patriots home opener against the Seahawks just weeks away, Game Time Picks has you covered. Game Time Tickets also has you covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, including event cancellation protection, 24-hour returns guarantee, job loss assurance, and on-time ticket delivery. So what are you waiting for? Take the guesswork out of buying football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Now, let's get back to the show.
Shout out once again to our good friends over at Game Time Tickets. All right, Ty, in terms of maybe to wrap up this podcast, another thing that Marchand mentioned or didn't really want to talk about was his contract. He's obviously a pending UFA at the end of the year. Pretty much said that he's not going to discuss negotiations, contract terms, any of that stuff with the media. It's going to keep it between him and Don Sweeney. Was not thrilled at the Hockey News piece that came out, which I feel like we were all like that 50 Cent meme when he was like, what are you saying fuck me for? I don't know what you're talking about. But I think whatever Hockey News thing said that The Bruins haven't had talks with Marchand yet or something like that. So Marchand was peeved about that whatever that story was came out there, said it didn't come from his camp. But beyond that kind of drama of it, what are you kind of expecting for a new deal for Marchand? I think we all expect that he's going to stay with the Bruins, but are we expecting the Bergeron Chara routine moving forward? Are we expecting like another 3-year deal or something like that? Like, how do you see kind of that evolving once he hits like this stage of his career with the Bruins?
I honestly wish that I knew. Dude, like, it's really hard to tell because I don't know how many guys are going to be out there now that are going to be out of their price range if they want to make another July 1 splash. Right now, and this is without projecting Trent Frederick's next contract, Jeremy Swayman's next contract. They have about $26 million in space. That's also without going into a potential increase, which many expect in the league, another $3 or $4 million probably. Yeah. So you're going to have money to play with. And I don't know if you're in that spot with Marchand where like you have to get him to take a 1-year deal to build the best roster. Would it be ideal? Of course. But I don't know if they're in that spot yet or if that he's in that spot yet. I would say 3 years at like $7 million per, or like $6 to $7 million. I think he would get a slight raise because his contract has been such a valuable steal for the last, 7 years. So I think you get a slight raise, but I don't think it'd be anything earth shattering. But again, what is that? Like, it's hard to project because he wants to win. We've talked about this earlier. Like, he wants to win a Stanley Cup. His drive is still there. And does he go, well, if I start taking these 1-year deals where it's like a $2 million base salary and $3 million bonuses that I hit by game 20, that allows us to have a really good roster. Like it's hard to get in his mind in terms of like what he wants. But I want to say he's going to go like 3-year deal and then we're going to start getting those other deals. But I don't know. It's like he's at that age where it's so hard to project.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's tough to, and again, I don't think he's going to be speaking about it. So we don't really know what exactly that mindset is, right? Because you have the track record with Chara and Bergeron, but you look at where they were at those stages of their career. Not to say that Bergeron was older, right? But like the amount of injuries, those kinds of things, the urgency of putting the team over the top at that stage, I think there's so many different factors that goes into it if you're Marchand, right? If it's the, how much of a bargain this contract he's on right now has been, whether he wants maybe that one more payday. Again, as you said, if it is, I don't know if it stays the same at like 6.5, 7, whether it's maybe a 3-year deal at 4, or it could straight up be the Bergeron Chara approach, right? Which would be a huge plus for the Bruins. Unfortunately, they can't use that money now to get Leon Draisaitl. So
yeah, that's what I mean. Like if they had to offer Leon Draisaitl $15 million, I think that's a greater selling point for a guy like Marchand to take less money. He's not available, right? Yeah. Like Sidney Crosby could be available, but there's been summer-long rumors in Pittsburgh that he's going to re-sign on a 4-year deal. That's yet to fully transpire, yet to be announced, but like there's been rumblings that he's not going to hit the market. So like beyond that, like there's nobody that should price you out of heaping like, you know what I'm saying? Like there's nobody that you're going to bring to town that's like, oh, he's got to take Marchand's got to take less now. I don't really see that happening. Sorry to interrupt. That just but that was what I meant to say. Like there's not a guy out there that I look at and go, oh, well, you can't sign him unless Marchand takes a 1-year, $2 million deal.
Yeah. You don't want John Tavares at 35, 36, whatever he is now.
That man did an interview with NHL Network. I'll never forget this. About 6 years ago. And they said, what's your favorite hobby? He says, oh, I like going to the grocery store. I was like, that's the most boring man in the world. Yeah, I don't want that man on my team.
Yeah, red flag.
Yeah.
We should have known as soon as great David Krejci moment is him coming back to training camp after that summer and being like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You guys don't want me anymore?
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah. That was so weird because it was like, had they signed him, they would have had to trade Backus and Krejci, 2 guys that wore A's. And you're like, well, that's weird. Yeah. And then, and I think Tavares has been fine, but I'm kind of happy they didn't do that now that I think about it.
Yeah, I know. No, it also, it shows like just how rare it is though for like going off the Draisaitl news, how often a player, one, hits the market that's at that age, at that skill level, but how often do they actually leave too? Like, I feel like the closest comparison was Stamkos in 16, where he technically hit the market, but then he signed with Tampa Bay at like 12:01. How often is it that you do have a Tavares, which again is why if you're the Bruins, I think it's good to have the fiscal flexibility to have the options open. But as you said, I don't see there being a guy that's worth $10-11 million per year on the horizon that you're circling is like, this is the next guy we want. Maybe it's, the next Clayton Keller or one of these guys that you look 2-3 years down the road, maybe gets dangled or a team wants to move or something like that. But again, you're looking way too far down the road at something that's such a tough variable to kind of project in terms of where guys are moving. So it does make for an interesting conundrum in terms of what Marchand is looking for. And I think it kind of does come down to the team talking to Marchand as to what he wants. Like, I think he wants to win, but to what degree? Does wanting to win mean you're signing a $1 million base salary, or is it $3 million a year over a bridge deal, gives you a little bit more security and a little bit of money? Or is it as is with like a bridge deal at his current pay rate, right? It can kind of go any way. Like, you can make a compelling argument for any one of those scenarios, I think, playing out.
Oh, 100%. And I would love it if they handled this before the season and get it just kind of over with. I wouldn't be totally surprised. But again, does that come back to how he feels? What does he want? Does he want 1 year? Is he in that 1 year at a time mode right now? Or is he more, nah, man, I still got 5 years left in me. Let's do a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal. And then after that, I'm going to do year by year. Like you can make the case for both of those. We talked about the surgeries. We've also talked about how effective he is and how we think he's going to continue to be effective. So both those conversations lead to either result, 1-year deals or another midterm deal. I'm right now, if I were to put money on anything, I would put money on, a 2 or 3 year contract, but I don't know. Marchand is completely legit with you, by the way, when he tells you, I'm not going to talk through the media. And the Bruins are not going to give you updates through the media either. So we're kind of in the unknown right now. There are certain guys who will talk and who will say things. Brad Marchand is not one of those. He is so respectful of the code of players and management and player. I almost said safety, but that's not what I'm looking for. Player privacy, I think, is what, like, he hates being mic'd up. He hates the league is mic'd up. He doesn't like it. He is fiercely pro player. And that's why, there are some people I saw, including, our 2 to 6 show on the Sports Hub that was saying, like, was Marchand throwing a jab at Swayman about the contract? And it's like, guys, you have no idea how pro player Brad Marchand is. Like, he would literally never, like, he's so fiercely protective of all of that crap that he wouldn't do it to a teammate or to his management team. So I think that we're going to be in the dark until he gets signed. We're just going to see that picture. We're going to, like you said, we're going to see the picture of him get tweeted by @NHL Bruins.
It's going to be him turning around in slow motion, smiling. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That'll be dropped at about 11:56 a.m. And then at 12:01, we get the release. That's how that will go down.
And it'll probably happen before Swayman's contract, which would actually be pretty funny if that happens. So I'm going to speak that into existence now. So we will see how that all kind of plays out. Ty, where can we read your stuff? Where can we listen to you on the airwaves? All of that good stuff with season starting up soon.
Yeah, you can find me at 98.sportshub.com, as well as the Sports Hub Underground podcast, which I do with my co-writer and my friend, Matt Dolph. And you can also hear me on the radio every now and then. Whenever they want to talk Bruins, they tend to call me, so that's nice. Not sure when that's going to be, but you can find me there. You can also find me online @_Ty Anderson. I'm trying to get better about using social media. I apologize. I'm very bad at it. So that's where I am. How about yourself?
Yeah, you can find my stuff over at boston.com and the Boston Globe. Where you covered every step of the way this season with features, recaps, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff the entire season. So go read my stuff over there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93. So Ty, once again, thank you for coming on the show, talking Bruins with us. We'll do this plenty of times as this year starts to ramp up. And this is episode 257 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.